Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 193. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and number one bestselling author of Practical Law of Attraction. Align yourself with the manifesting conditions and successfully attract your desires. And I'm also the founder of hiptalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores today. And today I have a very special guest with me, Maria Brito. Maria Brito is an award-winning New York-based contemporary art advisor, an author and curator, a Harvard graduate, originally from Venezuela. Her first monograph out there, published by Point Leaf Press in 2013, was the recipient of the Best Book Awards in both art and design categories. She has written for publications such as Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, Elle, Forbes, Artnet, Cultured Magazine, Departures, and the Gulf Coast Journal of Literature and Fine Arts from the University of Houston. For several years, Maria has taught her creativity course and companies. And in 2019, she launched Jumpstart, which is an online program on creativity for entrepreneurs based on years of research and observation in both areas of business and art. And she can be found on blog.mariabrito.com. And she's recently she's launching her book in March 2022 on how creativity rules the world. And it's HarperCollins published, and that'll be coming out in March 2022. And so today, Maria is going to be sharing some of her insights on how creativity rules the world. So welcome to the show, Maria.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for that very long intro. I think I have to shorten it because it sounds so pompous. And honestly, I'm so like down to earth and approachable. And so that sounds like a lot of things, but I'm so happy to be here and to hang out with you and to get to know your audience too, because I feel that there is always this amazing energetic exchange with the people who listen to you and respect you. And I feel the same level of respect and connection for people who trust podcast hosts the way that they trust you and come every week to hear your advice and your guests. And so I am super appreciative of whomever is listening today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, you are worth every bit of that introduction. When you are a lot of things and you do a lot of things, then the intro's going to be long, and there's nothing really we could have left out. So thank you so much for blessing us with your wonderful insights that you're going to be sharing with us today. So let's just start with the beginning. Like, how did you really get started in your career and get started being entrepreneurial and creative and all the many things that that you have to share with us?
Yes, thank you. Well, I was a corporate attorney when I moved to the States. I went to Harvard Law, and it was a huge transition because I came from Venezuela, and it was a country that back then, 23 years ago, when I moved, it was still in a relative good shape. And now it's a complete disaster, and it completely has fallen apart. But I did not want to stay there, and I was following my parents' dream of having a very dependable career. My parents were middle-class people who worked very, very hard, and they thought that the best way for me to succeed was to really follow a very secure path And when you're so young, you listen to your parents and you appreciate what they say, even though in your heart, that's not what I wanted to do. Actually, I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to be a performer. And I really had very big dreams for me, but I had to give up on them because my mom was very adamant that I needed to have something secure, and particularly try to figure out if, even back then, I could move to a different country. So I did. And it was a blessing for me to move to the US because first I continue here and I'm an American citizen. I have built my life here and I wouldn't have it any other way. But also because I think that the universe has very mysterious ways in which the pieces of the puzzle come together. So after graduating from Harvard Law, I moved to New York and I started working, and I had jobs in corporate America. I had jobs in big law firms. And little by little, I discovered I hated it because it was not what I wanted to do. It was not the language I wanted to speak. My heart was not into any of those things. Big law firms are very particular places. And I have nothing against lawyers or the people who actually gave me their trust at the time. They, paid me really well, but I was very miserable. And so I decided after I had my first child, it was a big epiphany for me, thinking, what am I going to teach this child and how am I going to conduct myself in the future if I can't even muster the courage every day to go to work, because I absolutely did not want to go there. And I did for a little while after my maternity leave was up. And I literally prayed and I said, God, help me figure out what to do with my life, because I absolutely cannot stay here. It's going to be the end of me if I have to keep coming back to this law firm. And I had been toying with the idea of quitting for a long time. And I had written several notes on a journal of what I wanted to do. And I thought, that being my own boss was going to be ultimately the way to succeed, because my skills would have been perfect to go to a bank and work for a Wall Street or to go for a consulting firm, but not to be an art advisor or not to be in anything creative. Nobody would have given me a job, right? They would have said you're either overqualified for this or you absolutely have no skills for this. And so I took a lot of notes of the things that friends in the past had told me where my skills were, and I had been informally telling them what artists to acquire and how to put things in their house together. And that was really something that gave me a lot of joy. And without having any contacts or contacts vary on the margins, to be honest with you. I knew a few people who were owners of galleries in New York, and I knew a few artists, and that was it. I said, I'm going to quit and I'm just going to hire a web designer, and I'm going to hire somebody who's going to help me with messaging and PR and whatnot. And God helped me. And so that was 13 years ago. And now I have a 7-figure business that I have built from scratch. My clients range from hip hop moguls to Fortune 500, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And I think that to align myself with your mission, this has to do a lot with the power of creation and manifestation. But also, once you are on the right path, you receive so many signals and confirmations that this is what you are meant to do, even when you face obstacles, challenges, and lows, which happen to all of us. There is still so much conviction inside of me that this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I have really mined this stage of my life to the max and will continue to do so, because this is where I thrive.
Wow, what an inspiration. And I really believe that, you know, so many times our parents, people's parents, they really have their good intentions at heart, but they don't realize the power of their words sometimes in guiding us to do things that are not necessarily according to our path. But it was it was all meant to be. It was all in perfect divine timing. And I'm just, happy for you that you we're able to really listen, to that voice and take that risk. It's all about really listening to those signs and taking those steps and asking for the guidance that you needed and getting that. And that is so law of attraction. That is so manifesting. And it really does align with our message. So thank you for your very heartfelt, vulnerable share on that. And it's pretty amazing, and it's pretty amazing what you've been able to accomplish in that period of time. So how can our audience, because I know that there's people in our audience that are probably struggling, with the same issues that you were struggling with. How can our audience listen and tap into their creativity, become more creative?
I think it's very important that we pay more attention and respect our intuition, because for many years, decades actually, like the word intuition and business and career seemed to be at odds. And it was like almost like dirty. Anybody thinking about intuition in business? No, 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 right? And in the past couple of years, or even 5 years, we have seen more and more experts who advise Wall Street firms or doctors and whatnot, that they believe in the power of that gut feeling and that intuition. And I wrote an entire chapter about intuition in my book because it's also absolutely and crucially related to creativity. And it's not the same thing, one thing or the other, right? I mean, like manifestation is not the same thing as intuition. Creativity is not the same as intuition. So why is it that we're not listening more? Is because we're inundated with information that comes from social media, news, music, podcasts, visual stimulations, particularly if people who live in big cities like I do, right? We're consistently and constantly bombarded with imagery and messages and ads and things like that. And on top of that, we have been, prior to the pandemic, glorifying the acts of multitasking. And what that does is really annihilate all the good ideas that you have, because you're doing everything halfway, even though you're thinking that you're doing it greatly, and you're not even absorbing what's happening outside of you or paying attention to those signals. And intuition, folks, is always right. What is wrong is our interpretation of the intuition. And why we interpret it wrong is because we've been on this earth for a certain amount of time, and we have gotten a lot of education, formal education. We have been taught what to think instead of how to think. And I think that if people are like, if I can give something to people away today, is to spend a good amount of time in silence, even if that for you means 5 minutes. That is a good amount of time for you. So you don't have to beat yourself up because you're not in lotus position for 3 hours with, like, that's ridiculous. We live in complicated times. And if you can every day spend 5 minutes in pure silence, you don't have to call it meditation. You don't have to call it levitation, because I think a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves on acquiring a state that is supernatural. And the truth is, we have to make those things more accessible, the way we call them and the way we actually present them to others, so that they can actually do it. If you can't stay 5 minutes in full silence, even if your mind is chattering, like, kind of try to stop a little bit with your breathing and your breath, you can actually start on a path of cumulative effects of allowing your intuition to speak to you more clearly. And it's I listen to my intuition when I change jobs. I've listened to my intuition all the time to guide me on the right path of what to do. I have closed my eyes and found clients that I needed to find at a very specific time, because I have allowed myself to incorporate that sixth sense that we all have, no matter what. We were born with that, and it doesn't have a very scientific explanation, but it exists. And so I think it's important that if you're listening, you allow your intuition to tell you things. And when you talk to your higher self, or that sixth sense, make sure to ask in clear answers, and not all the time, I mean, clear questions. Not all the time you're going to get a definitive answer, but you will get specific chunks of information throughout your day or throughout your week. And it's important you take notes in your phone or in your journal of what are those symbols, signals, feelings. You don't necessarily have to see things with clarity in your mind, but it's important you kind of like take those little pieces and put them together to have a better sense of what is the big picture.
That's amazing. So you mentioned a lot of different things there, and I want to touch on a couple of them. One, you mentioned that creativity is you distinguish that and define that differently from intuition. So can you kind of give the differences between creativity and intuition?
Yes, creativity is an amalgamation of skills, and it is your unique ability to come up with ideas of value that are relevant and original. And if those ideas are yours and they are informed by your surroundings, by your own experiences, they have to ultimately be unique, because nobody sees things the way you do, and no two people in the world have had the same experience, not even siblings. If you ask my oldest and my youngest their experiences growing up, they have a very different take on things. And we all live in the same household, and we live in the same city, and we do the same trips together, right? So it is very important to acknowledge that you do have things to contribute. And when you think about the creativity that people attribute to artists, that is one type of creativity, but it's not just the only one. I mean, Steve Jobs was one of the most creative people on earth, and he was not an artist, or for certain people he was. But what I'm trying to point at here is that each one of us are born with creativity, because it's an amalgamation of skills. And what are those skills? Those are skills that are about, autonomy, authenticity, the risk taking, the ability actually to read the signals of your intuition. All those things are skills for life that people have not necessarily developed as much as they could. And why is that? Because we have been buried under technology for the past 20 years without allowing our brains and our hearts to incorporate fully and in what matters most, right? And so that's why intuition and creativity and manifestation are not the same thing. Because yes, the act of creation is absolutely and radically important, because without ideas and without executing those ideas, there is no progress on earth. As simple as that. Without ideas, we're going backwards, right? And so we want to know what your ideas are, whether that is for a new book or a new product or a new business or a new service. We know that each one of you has something to contribute to society. And if you're a part of a business already, and if you're already in a company and you're considering a move, or you just want to keep where you are, but you just want to grow differently, because I think human beings have a desire always to self-actualize and improve and get better at what they do, then it's important that you dig into your creative faculties, which are absolutely there. And that's why I wrote this book, because I think that we have not been able to tap into human potential and as we should. And I think it's part of it has to do with the way formal education is given to children all over the world. And it's not just a problem in the United States, which has an amazing education once you get to be able to pay for private education. But the standard education, it's not the greatest. And it's not because we don't have the right teachers. We have the right teachers, but we haven't trained them well. And the problem is that as you get older, it's almost like it accumulates more and more, and it clogs your arteries. The arteries of like the flow of creativity gets clogged more and more. And then the path for many people was to go to the big companies, and the big companies give you a huge manual on how things are to get done. So this is all inheritance from how things were. The problem is that I think we all know the past 24 months, things that once worked don't work anymore. And to face the challenges that we're going to face as Americans and in the world in general, we have to be equipped with our own system to be able to respond swiftly to those changes. And there is nothing more important than developing that creative genius and that creative part inside of you to give you all the solutions and all the tools. My book is not about how to use Twitter or TikTok, or it's these are habits that are good for life. It's the same thing with your book and manifestation. These are things that have existed for a long time, in fact for centuries. And what we are doing is that we're channeling and writing them and explaining them in easy to consume ways, so that we actually make a difference in people's lives, and we allow them to receive this information that probably is not necessarily something that they are consistently researching. And I made a very specific point of backing up almost each one of the chapters has a scientific study in a fun and interesting way, just so that you're not going to be reading data or boring things, but just so that I give this kind of connective glue saying, okay, if you still don't believe this is true, this is it has been proven by science.
I love it. No, this is really, really great information. And there was one other point that I wanted to ask you about, and you had mentioned about how the intuition is always right. So I want to dive into that a little bit, because you mentioned the intuition's always right, but our interpretation of it is generally wrong. So can you,
Yes.
how do we know how to interpret our intuition? Because I agree with you that, we're, I mean, we're brought up, number one, like stifling our creativity. It just gets shut down, to stop using your imagination. Don't daydream. Don't draw outside of the lines. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of your scientific studies talk about how, kids, I mean, you start off with, like 85%, creativity. And
Yes.
then by the time you're by the time you're our age, it goes down to about 5%, because, it just gets shut down over and over. And then also, like, we're just so inundated with all this outside noise that it does get a little hard. It does get a little bit shut down. So I acknowledge what you said there. I totally agree with that. And I also like how you have packaged this into, there's the intuition, there's creativity, and then there's manifestation. And it sounds like the three of these really are separate entities, and they all sort of work together. So that's a lot to unpack, but let's just talk about that, learning how to interpret that
Yes.
intuition.
Yes, we are equipped with the sixth sense, right? And these are things that have been not necessarily proven by science, but they have been noticed by psychologists and neuroscientists throughout, times. And let's just even say like 50 years ago is where research and development has gotten really strong in these areas, right? And why do we all know that we have intuition? Because anybody who's listening knows that once or twice or many times in their lifetimes, they knew the answer to something, even though there was no possibilities of knowing, because they were not there, or because they had never had an experience with that before, because they didn't appreciate that or feel that through the five senses, right? And so I'm sure people have been warned of a danger that they had to avoid. I'm sure people have had serendipities in their lives where they crossed the road at the right time and met the right person to the right thing, right? And so these things are intuition. This is, Carl Jung wrote a lot about this, but in a different way. And this is like, psychology of the, 19th century. So we're not going to get into that right now, but each one of us has had a lot of experiences where our intuitive self tells us what to do in any given time or what's happening without knowing, and why is that we interpret it wrong is because we have gotten already a lot of our own biases and a lot of our own issues, problems, knowledge, etc. And we tend to dismiss things like, no, or like, if I make that phone call, I'm going to get rejected again. Or if I try to ask my boss for this, he's going to say no, right? I mean, like all the different things that we use to take ourselves out of our dreams or out of our great ideas, because our knowledge, the rationale, the logic, which is actually very important. I'm not telling people not to rely on logic. We need a lot of the times, but we do need the intuitive part to work in conjunction with our logic. And so how do we nurture our intuitive self is the first one is really by spending time in silence. And again, you start with the 5 minutes and you increase as you can. And why is that? Is because again, everything that is surrounding us is robbing a little piece of our brains to distract us from the things that, we needed to cultivate. And also, again, like we live in the era of distractions, and they get multiplied and more, and our brains have been hijacked by political fights. And I mean, it's really like we live like on this heightened state of, a combination of anxiety and kind of like terror, right? I mean, it's like how we have been in the past 2 years and more. But spending time in silence is one of the most important things that anybody can do to come up with better ideas for their businesses, careers, transitions, you name it, and also to develop their intuition. And the second thing is to ask questions every morning. How do you ask those questions? Avoid leading questions. If I say, is Victoria the best manager for my company? That's a yes or no. I don't like the yes or no because they are so they can be tricky, right? I mean, I think it's better when you ask who could be the best manager for my company, or where can I go and find a good manager for my company. I'm going to give you an example that is written in my book. A few years ago, by the way, there is truth. When you are in your shower, you have the best ideas. And why is that? Because you're in silence. Because you are in silence. If you take a shower with your phone, you're crazy. Please don't do that. You know what I mean? Please don't. Okay. But I was taking a shower and I remembered a client that I had not seen in about 2 years, a woman very dear. And I sent her, I paid attention to my intuition, right? I had that thought. It's the incubation effect of when you're having a lot of ideas and suddenly something comes to your mind that has no relationship to what's going on right now. So I sent her a message, a text, and I say, how are you doing? It's been a long time. And she got back to me right away. And she's like, oh my goodness, I have been thinking about you and I wanted to reach out to you because I have this big painting that I bought a few years ago, and I want to sell it, and it's a difficult one. She wanted almost $1 million for that painting. It was a very important painting, but it was a difficult one because of the subject matter, etc. I say, oh my goodness. I said, well, look, if you allow me to work with the painting for a month, I'll see if I can find you a buyer for it. And it was going to be a significant commission for me. So I wanted to work alone in that deal for me alone, right? I mean, representing buyer and seller at the same time is a very good thing to do. So, I emailed a bunch of people. I called curators at museums, clients, this and that. Nothing. It was about 2.5 weeks of me, and like people were like, no, no. Okay. Gosh, it was like the third week maybe, and I knew I only had a month, and she was considering that she was going to consign it with an auction house and whatnot. So I said, I sat down and I closed my eyes very deeply and I stayed for 5 minutes in silence, and I said, who is the buyer of this painting?
Ooh.
Please point me towards that, right? And great silence. And all I saw was an image of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, right? And I was like, okay, my intuition is playing games with me, right? I didn't see anything. I said, okay. And so I went on with my day, and I, was doing my thing, very busy, no time to be in silence anymore. And then, like about 8 hours after that Eiffel Tower thing, I remember a French dealer that I had met, an art dealer that I had met.
Oh my
I
goodness.
had no relationship with him other than that we met. He gave me his card, and I had read in a magazine that he collected that particular artist. So I emailed him that night, and I said, look, a client of mine, you don't know her, and she's got this painting, and I think that you collect this artist, is a very specific type of artist. You have an interest? And he wrote back right away, like, I want to send someone to see that painting because I'm very interested in it. And
Oh my goodness.
5 days after, he bought it.
Ah, that is amazing. That is amazing. I mean, and just sitting in silence you only were in silence for like 5 minutes asking that
Yeah, and
open-ended.
I hadn't really like utilized it up until then. I mean,
Mhm.
I was like very alpha. I was like, okay, let me call, let me email, let me see. I went through all the contacts that I thought could be appropriate for this, texted a bunch of friends, offer, like I said, oh shit, like help me, please. I'm sure we can sell this. It's a great thing, whatever. Zero, zero, like
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, I was like literally the shoe was going to drop. And then I said, like, okay, this is at a resort that I should have used from the get-go, and I don't know why I didn't do it. And I did it, and there it is. It was $1 million, and like the sale, and it was a 10% commission for me.
Nice. Oh my God. What a testament to not the imagination, but to the intuition, that's an amazing story. And I think that's the thing with entrepreneurs, is, you mentioned like being very alpha about it. And I get stuck in that, trying to figure out the how and the who and all of that too. And you're just really verifying, validating, that need that we really do need to just, we have all the answers within that, but we have to go within. We have to quiet all that outside chatter and turn within, because those answers are there, and it's pretty amazing. And you mentioned asking yourself in a particular way, open-ended questions, not, like leading questions. And I understand, you as an attorney, you probably
Oh,
did.
yes. Leading questions and yes and no's. And especially because I have had to learn how to be a person who navigates better the grays and not be an black and white and extreme. And because I appreciate having an opinion and having convictions, but there's nothing creative or intuitive that comes from being rigid and
Mhm.
being extreme in your positions, right? There is a level of flexibility that we have to allow ourselves as entrepreneurs, human beings, citizens. Important ideas don't necessarily come out of just extremes, because you annihilate and you negate the other side immediately. And I think it's very difficult to actually come with solutions to problems that benefit society or your niche if you're always so fixated in just one position. And believe me, I spent many years being a black or white person. If it's not radical success, then it's a failure. You know what I mean? Or like,
Mhm.
if it's not exactly what I wanted and the way I wrote it in my manifestation book, and I get this other thing, then I don't want it, right?
I can
So
relate so much. I can
that's
relate to what
not
you're
how
saying.
life is, right? It
Yeah.
does not work like that, right? It's like being in a consistent state of allowing,
Mhm.
like allowing, open, uh, being receptive, which is a little bit of like letting go from the alpha. I'm not saying do not act. I'm saying, can you consider that there is a state also of like receiving, that there the whatever you're getting might not look exactly as you did it in your scripting of how reality is going to play out yet. there is a reason why.
Yeah, I believe in that wholeheartedly, that, there is a reason, and you have to be open and willing to receive what is there, because that's going to lead you along your greatest achievement and your greatest path. And so that's beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your creativity program and how people are getting a lot of results with that.
Yes. When I built my business, I started getting all these big clients who, again, were like manifested through word of mouth, and they were CEOs of companies or head of divisions, and they were always fascinated with the job that I had crafted for myself and how I was interacting with this incredible artist and owners of galleries and things like that. But they were always very curious about two things. One is how you actually transitioned and pivoted your career. And the second thing is like, we want to get inside the minds of artists. And so sometimes I would bring them to an artist studio, a famous artist, whatever, and they would not get the answers they wanted, right? Like, I mean, because artists are very particular people, and sometimes they are a lot in their heads. And you don't ask an artist, how do you get to be this brilliant and creative? Because they are not going to answer that question. A true artist is going to have a hard time answering that question, right? But I had been taking notes and interviewing artists for a long time, and I had worked with them in different capacities. So I started putting all these notes together. And when this CEOs of companies and heads of divisions would call me, I said, I'm going to teach a program for your employees, which actually is going to give them insight on the minds of artists, and also is going to tell you how I transitioned and pivoted my career, which has to do a lot about on the same way that artists think. And so this started creating, these programs for companies, these workshops, 1 day, 2 day, things like that. And after it was so successful with the companies, because they loved it, and I mean, what is a program going to fix all your life? No, of course not. But is it going to give you a lot of different tools that you don't have? Sure, it is. So after I was doing this thing and getting rave reviews from all these companies, I said, why don't I sort of package this for the world to have it at a fraction of what these companies are paying, and invite other people to appreciate and understand these methods of thinking. And when you're as busy as I am, prior to the pandemic, I mean, once a month I was in a different country, or like, I traveled a lot and I had a lot of work to do, and I'm still taking care of my kids and husband. So it's not easy to say I'm going to take 14 hours or more to actually design a curriculum, and then I'm going to take 12 hours to like shoot a video for like, it was just really out of the question. But I was like, I had that nudge inside of me, because I had gotten the question also from people, aspiring young entrepreneurs who wanted to get unstuck and things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I did. And so I launched it in 2019, and it's really, and continues to be, one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life, because you're dealing with a different level. It's not anymore the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It is an entrepreneur who's sweating and trying to figure out why is it that their products or services are not sticking, like, or what is it that I need to do? Why am I seeing things? And your brain, again, and this is something that I emphasize a lot in my book, is once your brain gets used to a way of doing things, it gets very comfortable, and it shuts down to other possibilities. And so what I did is like, how can we see things from so many perspectives that you're missing just one thing, and just one thing, to make your venture a successful one? And it's because your nose is against that glass, and you're not seeing that there are other things happening in the margins. Like, the periphery of what you do is filled with incredible opportunities to strike gold. So the program is divided in several modules. It's very, very easy to watch. People can go at their own pace. It's I mean, it's a joy really, because the information is bite-sized. It's easy to digest. At the end of each of the each of the videos has their own summaries and their own exercises and this and that. Like, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have done a lot of these courses. And then I added a lot of fun bonuses. I did one about creativity and money, because a lot of people have this kind of also the myth that creativity and business and money, they don't go together. Of course they do. It's all the same thing. That actually is the same thing. If you are creative, you should be compensated for your ideas, and be compensated really
Amen.
well if those ideas are great, right? So I'm a huge advocate for people leaving behind the shame of getting paid for being great, for being entrepreneurs, for having ideas. And again, we are all waiting to hear your ideas, to listen to what you have to say, to show us your products or your art or your new business or your new service. The world is filled with new problems that didn't exist 2 years ago. And we are dying to know what is it that people are coming up with. And we don't want those people to not tell us because they are afraid of what is going to be the response, or they are afraid of failure. Failure is something that we have to embrace and accept as part of the venture, the entrepreneurial venture, and in fact, as part of life, right? It happens all the time. It happens to the best people. It happens to the worst people too. So we have to actually leave the fear of failure, and also debunk the myth that creativity and money are not together or part of the same sentence, because they actually are.
Amen. That is absolutely the truth. And you have to rid yourself of those beliefs that you are not worthy of being compensated for things that you're putting out there that are changing the world, that you're an innovator. And we all of us entrepreneurs, we're all innovators, and we deserve to be compensated for our creative efforts and our innovations. And so I love that your course helps walk people through exactly how to bust through that myth and get you and I love that you said that, the idea is right there in front of your face. I mean, in most cases, it's just that, you're kind of walking around with this through these filters, that are really there to make our lives easier. But sometimes this, convenience, this comfort, has a tendency to sabotage our best selves, because we just, are not able to really see past those filters. So this course, it sounds amazing. It sounds like it's something that is going to really help people to do that. And so tell us about your book that's coming out in March, How Creativity Rules the World.
Well, it's a project that I have so much pride about, because it's been 13 years that it has taken me to gather all this information. It's written in a way that it draws upon art history, entrepreneurship, neuroscience, psychology, and culture. And so it has a variety of different things that come together. At the end of each chapter, there is an exercise or a series of exercises that I call Alchemy Lab. I call them alchemy because you transform one thing and you take what you have and turn it into gold. And that's what alchemists did throughout ancient times. And so I want people to come to this material in the book and take their ideas and turn them into gold. And that is actually the subtitle of the book, is The Art and Business of Turning Your Ideas into Gold. And I was very ambitious in the sense that I wanted this to be the ultimate guide on creativity, so people don't ever have to go anywhere else but this book and keep mining it, past, present, and future. And why is that? Because I feel that a lot of books gives us the things for today. but I wanted to do something that people could have with them and they can open it 20 years from today and say, this still gives me value. And why is that, and how is that done? It's done by actually going to the core of all the things that are important for creatives and for creativity. And for people who are not creative, it's even more important. People who feel that they don't have what it takes to be creative, this book is going to give you all those tools. And I I was telling you before, there's a lot of history in the book. And why is that? Is because if it worked 600 years ago, and it worked 300 years ago, and it worked 5 years ago, it's probably going to work again in the future. And that's why I am so interested in bringing all this storytelling and keep the reader engaged with things that have happened in the past that are so interesting, so that the reader can feel, that they can be that person. And if not, well, they can. I also peppered it with a lot of anecdotes from my own business, so that, I'm not one of those like big names in history, but I can tell you that I utilized all those same skills and habits to build this business from scratch until it became a 7-figure business. And I think that if I can do it, and I'm an immigrant, and I came here with almost nothing, to be honest, then anybody else can do it. And it's I mean, it like sometimes people might say, well, yes, but you had this and you had that. I said, well, we all come with our circumstances and the things that we have, and we try for the better part to make the best that we can with what we have, right? Not all of us have the same circumstances. Some people will have more, some people will have less, but I think that the time is now. The time where we have been able to evaluate everything that happened prior to the pandemic is now. The time to come up to, this is a very new America we are seeing, is the time of the great resignation. People are just leaving their jobs in droves because they were unhappy, the same way I was so unhappy when I quit that job for a different reason. And we want to see those people integrated in a very different way. We want to see, as I'm saying before, I want to see you come up with your ideas, because nobody thinks like you do. Nobody has the same two stories. And the amazing bonus that I want to give the audience is that if they pre-order my book before it comes out on March 15th, then if they email the receipt to book@mariabrito.com, they get immediate free access to the course, which is $297. So I think that that's a great deal, because a book is $28. So, and not only that, the book is going to stay with you for life. And I can guarantee you that, because everybody who was an early reader already told me this is going to be a classic.
Oh, this is amazing, amazing, amazing. And so, so people can they order this book
Yes,
right now? And they can
right
order the
now.
book right now. And when they order the book, and it's 20, they pre-order the book, and as
It's
long as they order it before it
March
releases
15th.
on
Yes.
March 15th, they're going to get your course that you just told us that is also life-changing, that's normally $297 for free. All they got to do is email you at book@mariabrito.com. And
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
all
look,
going to
we
be
also have ebooks and audiobooks. I mean, the ebook is $15 and the audiobook is, I don't know, Audible, whatever it is, right? But I love the idea of the hardcover because it stays with you forever. And I don't know
Yeah.
what's, like technology, I don't know, whatever. Whatever format you buy, we're honoring it. If you want to pay $15 for the ebook, Kindle has it, Amazon has it, Barnes and Noble has it, bookshop.org, IndieBound, Books a Million. Support your independent bookstores. You can call any of the independent bookstores in the United States and say, I want Maria Brito's How Creativity Ruled the World. Can you please pre-order it for me? You pay, they get it. We absolutely want to support those businesses too. They're very important, and they are actually the lifeblood of this whole community of readers and people who have interest and ideas and things like that. And without those libraries, bookstores, I'm sorry, then we wouldn't really have Amazon anyway. So I think that we never leave them behind. But for comfort, to make you comfortable, it's also available online anywhere. So
That's awesome. Well, I had very good intuition before speaking to you today that this was going to be an amazing episode, and I was correct in my intuition.
Thank
This
you.
has really been an amazing, very supportive, very insightful, very original and unique episode. And I just really, really am grateful for all of the wisdom that you have gathered throughout your many years doing this, and that you had the foresight to make this happen for yourself so that you could be a pioneer and help other people who will find your work, and they need to find your work so that they can, really break into their own and and take and be, be the change and help other people as well by, just being a representative of this work. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us, and thank you for being on the Power of Your Mind podcast.
Thank you, Victoria. I really have the same feeling. We float really well. I feel really good to have been here today, and I am sending lots of love and creative wishes to everybody who is listening. And I just want to end it with having that confidence in your ideas, and knowing that if you have heard it from your mind or your heart or your gut, that's your intuition telling you to pay attention.
Ooh, love it. Wonderful words to end the show on. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the Power of Your Mind podcast.